Chapter 431. Giabella City 6. This chapter has some controversial views on the homeless, beggars, and people who have lost their money due to addiction. I think it's important to note that this is the character's opinion and that the author hadn't espoused these views in any of the other chapters, so these don't feel like the author's personal views. The news was full of conspiracy theories that Eugene and Noir might be in some kind of relationship. Considering that such a clear video had been delivered to the news in less than half a day, it was clear that Noir had pulled some sort of scheme. Noir's influence may have also played a role in all of the conspiracy theories being raised by the panelists. He hadn't honestly thought that it would spread this quickly, but such speed was what Eugene wanted. If the rumor hadn't spread, Eugene would have tried openly walking around Giabella Park to personally spread the news regarding his whereabouts. He didn't care about the conspiracy theories. No matter how long they spent yapping away about it, in the end, it was just unconfirmed speculation, and anyone who actually knew Eugene would know that he would absolutely never join hands with Noir Giabella. Even so, I guess we'll have to stay in this city for some time, Eugene thought. Suddenly, he started feeling homesick for the Lionheart estate in Kiel. If you added in the time while he was away in Shimuin, it had already been a year since he had last returned to his room in the estate. Still, he had made sure to keep sending news back. Although it wasn't a proper exchange of news, as Eugene could only send letters from wherever he found himself instead of receiving them, he had made sure to send news to his family when he had first headed out to the Lehanjar mountain range and before he arrived here in Giabella City. Sometimes he was able to hear news about the family from Sienna. Carmen was currently going through closed-door training to reach the 8th star of the White Flame formula, and Gilead and Guillaume had both managed to reach the 7th star in close succession. Cyan was also working hard to get over the barrier to the 5th star, and Seal had recently managed to reach the 5th star. The family has enough strength to protect themselves, Eugene thought thankfully. Melkith had taught spirit summoning to the forest elves as an excuse to wander in and out of the estate's forest. Elves possessed an extremely high aptitude for spirit summoning. The elven race was naturally able to summon low-level spirits without even having to practice any particular spirit summoning techniques. With Melkith's teachings on top of their innate aptitude, most of the elves in the Lionheart Forest were now able to command spirits of the intermediate or higher levels. In other words, this meant that the Lionhearts had access to dozens of mid-level spirit summoners. Apart from that, they also had the reinforced White Lion Knights, and Carmen's 3rd Division and Guillaume's 5th Division from the Black Lion Knights were also stationed at the main estate. Eugene felt relieved. The current Lionhearts are pretty strong. Even without me there, they still have Lady Carmen. With Carmen there was no need to get too worried, even if their opponent was a high-ranking demon folk. Moreover, since she was currently on her way to reaching the 8th star of the White Flame formula, wouldn't that mean Carmen was even stronger than when she took part in the subjugation of Iris? On top of that, Gilead and Guillaume were there as well, and Sienna had also personally reinforced the estate's defensive formation. The defensive formation was able to defend against almost all attacks and would immediately deliver the news to Sienna the moment that an enemy attack was detected. The Lionheart estate had its own personal warp gate. If an enemy were to attack the main house, Sienna could head over from Aroth through the warp gate while the defensive formation withstood the attack. Eugene assessed the risks. There's no way that the Demon King of Incarceration would make the first strike against the Lionhearts. So the only possibility left would be Amelia Merwin, right? It was said that even a rat could bite a cat when cornered, but would Amelia Merwin really do something as crazy as that? On the surface, Kiel wasn't involved in the problems going on in Nahama. However, if Amelia or those instigated by her were to attack the Lionheart estate, that would count as an invasion of the Kiel Empire's territory. When they were already in such an unfavorable situation, doing so would mean turning even the Imperial army into their enemy. Though with me absent, I don't think they would try something like that, Eugene decided. In the end, the biggest risk to the Lionhearts came from the fact that Eugene was away from the estate. But thinking about it calmly, Eugene couldn't always be at the estate. Since the Lionhearts were the descendants of Vermouth and a martial clan, they needed to be able to deal with external threats on their own. It wasn't like Eugene needed to emphasize this fact to them, as those bearing the last name of Lionheart would naturally possess such an awareness. Eugene grinned and pulled up his hood. I also have my own problems to deal with, Eugene muttered. It was already dark, but it definitely didn't feel like it was nighttime. This was because the 3 Giabella faces floating in the sky were shooting out colorful lasers. and all the streets below had their own lighting sources. He had heard it was called a city without a night, but it really did live up to its name. The name used for this whole area might be Giabella City, but most of the land had been used for Giabella Park, and even what little land remained was solely used as residences for Giabella Park employees. This enormous Giabella Park was divided into a total of 4 sections. There was Fantasy Square, where Eugene and his party were currently staying. Adventure Square had various rides, safaris, and even a huge water park. Gamble Square gathered all the entertainment that had to do with gambling. And Dream Square provided a variety of more sensual entertainment. The 4 sections were all connected up by their own warp gates, but warp gates weren't the only means of transportation in Giabella Park. Because the land area was so large and the number of tourists so enormous, warp gates alone wouldn't be able to handle the flow of traffic. Also, crucially, the warp gate lacked the fun of traveling. In a mega-tourist destination like this, even moving around needed to have its own type of fun. That was why dream trains were located beneath Giabella Park. Although Eugene didn't know why the trains had been named dream trains when most of the names in this park used the word Giabella, there were several different trains traveling along dozens of routes in a subway beneath this entire territory. As the city without a night, the dream trains of Giabella City ran 24 hours daily. Most of the people heading down into the subway beneath Fantasy Square at this time were unaccompanied guardians whose children had played to their heart's content during the day and had now been put to bed in their accommodations above. There might not be any restricted areas in Giabella Park, but you still weren't allowed to take children with you to Gamble Square or Dream Square. Eugene was currently surrounded by a crowd of people who were traveling to those 2 locations. The smell of alcohol and perfume mixed with body odor combined into the stench of desire. The people heading to Gamble Square were dreaming of money, and those heading to Dream Square were looking to sate their lust. Whichever way they went, their exposed desires would be taken advantage of, and all of them would eventually end up offering tribute to Noir Giabella. Not everyone in the subway was there to take the trains. There were also people who couldn't afford to go to either Dream Square or Gamble Square. Their bodies gave off a stale, putrid odor. The emergency doors in the subway were always open. If you went through one of those and dug down even deeper, you would arrive at a set of abandoned railroads where the sound of the running trains could be heard echoing throughout the day. Although they were called abandoned railroads, they had actually been built for this very purpose from the very beginning. This long and deep abandoned railroad passed through all 4 sections of Giabella Park, and its true purpose was to serve as a garbage dump. The human waste that couldn't be recycled or shipped out fell down from the 4 squares above and arrived here at this abandoned railroad. Most people who fell into this garbage dump were divided into 2 types. A person who had dreamed of making a fortune but ended up losing all of his money at Gamble Square, and a person who was blinded by lust and gave everything they had to a hostess in Dream Square. Whichever way it had happened, these people had ended up going bankrupt while they were here in Giabella Park. They slept in this garbage dump at night and wandered around the 4 squares during the day. Desire could still be seen in their eyes as well. Actually, the desire burning in the eyes of these pieces of trash, who had been thrown down into the abandoned railroad, was even more blatant and murky than the desire shown by the people who were merely walking through the subway. As soon as they were able to scrounge up a few pennies, these people would immediately go to Gamble Square or head over to Dream Square. They either dreamed of making their money back through gambling, or they tried to escape what little remained of their shattered minds through fleeting pleasure and dreams. The abandoned railroad beneath Giabella Park was so famous that even Eugene had heard about it in advance. When Eugene arrived at one of the entrances to the abandoned railroad, he just looked down into it rather than heading straight inside. The abandoned railroad was likely located only a few dozen meters below the subway lines. Every few minutes, there would be the rumbling sound of a train passing above, and both the ceiling and the floor shook every time this happened. Streams of water could be seen pouring down from the ceiling at rare intervals. Those streams seemed to provide all the drinking water these people needed, but hadn't they ever thought about using it to wash off their stench? As Eugene looked down into the abandoned railroad with his face twisted into a scowl, he soon understood why they didn't do so. As long as they climbed up into the subway, there were many clean restrooms that they could use to clean themselves up, but there were no such restrooms here in the abandoned railroad. While the channels used to transport the flows of water falling from the ceiling could be used as showers, there didn't seem to be much meaning in doing so. Just how many people are in there? Eugene asked himself. This was the darkness of the brightly sparkling and beautiful Giabella Park. This abandoned railroad deep underground had been turned into a den of human waste. Eugene glanced up at the swaying and blinking lights that lit up the abandoned railroad. Most lights hanging down from the ceiling were dim, but they were still being supplied with mana. Spare change? A hand reached out from the darkness and blocked Eugenie's path forward as he walked down into the abandoned railroad. Even a little would be fine. In the short time that Eugene had spent walking down to the abandoned railroad, he had already been accosted by beggars several times. This may have been because the robe that Eugene was wearing was clean rather than dirty or smelly. He had been forced to listen to their begging several times, but he had never once given them any money. Eugene couldn't feel any emotion other than disgust towards these kinds of people. If you don't have any money, the hand blocking his way forward suddenly began to shake. Eugene furrowed his brow as he stared closely at the hand's movements. The thumb and index finger came together to make a heart. As the beggar then said, "Then how about love?" This sight immediately ignited an intense killing intent and rage in Eugenie's heart. As the heart made from the beggar's fingers shook in front of his eyes, Eugene didn't bother to hold back any longer. Ting. Although Eugene didn't directly pull out his sword and swing it at her, a black surge of mana burst forth in a slash that severed the hand at the wrist. "Don't you think you should have thought about it a little more before cutting my hand off? What if I had turned out to be just a normal human being?" A voice said sulkily. When not a single drop of blood was flowing from the surface of the sliced wrist, it took incredible shamelessness to say something like that. As Eugene continued glaring into the darkness with narrowed eyes, Giabella, who was also wearing a robe, poked her head out to greet him. "Hey Hamel," Noor said cheerfully. "It seems you're in a much better mood now, huh? Earlier you seemed pretty bad." "Earlier?" Eugene repeated as if confused. "Yes, earlier. I'm talking about when you were in the Giabella face," Noor clarified. "At that time honestly, even from your perspective you were acting a bit strange, right?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Eugene shamelessly denied. "I just felt shitty because I was looking at you." Rather than looking shitty earlier, you looked bad in a different meaning of the word," Noor muttered as she tilted her head in curiosity. But instead of asking him any more questions, she just walked out in front of Eugene. "I knew that you would come here." Eugene kept his silence. "Well, to tell the truth, I have been keeping an eye on you," Noor easily admitted. "Does that bother you?" "No way, it would be strange for you to be bothered by something like that. After all, this is my city and the place that you are staying at is my own hotel. So isn't it only natural for all of your movements to be relayed back to me?" The news, Eugene brought up bluntly. "Well, you saw that? I was kind of predicting that you would come looking for me to express your anger if you saw it," Noor confessed. "In that case, your prediction was wrong," said Eugene. Fu. I also predicted that my prediction would be wrong," Noor bragged while shaking her finger admonishingly. "After all, haven't I managed to read a bit of your intentions? I may have added a little bit of my own flavor into the news, but that much should be okay, right?" Noor giggled, then pointed to the abandoned railroad and asked, "So, what do you think?" "What exactly are you asking?" Eugene demanded. "Didn't you come here to see the filthy underbelly of my city?" Noor asked, her smile deepening. "I realized you would come here after I tried to think about what this city might be like from your perspective, Hamel." Eugenie's lips were glued shut. 300 years ago, during the era in which you first lived, it was only natural and obvious for you humans to resent the demon folk. The demon folk certainly did many things that deserved resentment. However, that's not the case in the current era now, is it? Noor said leadingly. Without saying anything, Eugene just listened to Noor speak. Noor deliberately held up both hands and brought them together to make a heart. The current era can be said to be an era of love and peace. Demon folks do not hunt humans, nor are they waging war against them. Here in Helmuth, the demon folk protect the humans and get along well with them. Eugene didn't attempt to deny Noir's words. When he had traveled through Helmuth last time and even before that, he had learned what the relationship between demon folk and humans was like in the present era. At first, he hadn't wanted to accept or acknowledge it, but 300 years was a long enough time for what was once common sense to have completely overturned. This is Giabella Park, a city that focuses on satisfying all human desires. To accomplish that, I'm not doing anything particularly heinous now, am I? At most, aren't I just charging money to sell them dreams? And well, I can't help it if they decide to spend all the money that they have on their dreams, Noor said as she leaned closer to Eugene. This abandoned railroad is a place made for idiots like them. From the time when we were first designing Giabella Park, We had expected that there would be some waste generated. Just what is it that you're trying to say? Eugene demanded impatiently. Noor narrowed her eyes. Hamel, aren't you searching in this city for a reason to keep hating me? Eugenie's eyebrows twitched. He had the right answer. Noor grinned and continued speaking. However, like I just said, it's not like I'm doing anything wrong with this city, right? And please don't misunderstand. I am not keeping these pieces of trash from leaving by force. It's just that they don't want to leave. Noor held out her finger and pointed at the roof of the abandoned railroad. Do you see those streams of water over there? I also made sure that those were drilled before the tunnel was opened, because I knew that the people here would need this water to drink. Workers are also sent out to periodically clean the waterways of the feces found floating in them and the filth left in the corners. We also give jobs to anyone who wants them. Noor listed proudly. Eugene didn't show any response. Noor continued, apart from that, I also provide them with the minimum necessary welfare. Even so, what can I do if they voluntarily decide to live like trash? Even if I give them money to go home, they just go to the casino or the succubus club and waste it. So, there's nothing I can do about it, right? That's right, Eugene said with a calm nod of his head. It doesn't seem like you're planning to do anything too evil with this city. To be honest, this investigation had fallen a lot flatter than he had been hoping for. Eugene had expected to come across something like a terrible human experiment taking place within this abandoned railroad. Or perhaps a slaughter show being put on for humans and demon folk with perverted tastes. But there was nothing. He had searched by himself and used some spells, but Giabella Park was exactly as it seemed. The abandoned railroad was littered with human waste while people drunk on their own desires roamed the luxurious upper reaches of the subway. You're also correct that I was looking through this city for more reasons to hate you, Eugene revealed. Noor snickered. What a shame, right? Currently I am only engaging in legal business. Even if I don't do anything illegal or evil, I can still. That's the problem, Eugene interrupted with another nod. The current Helmuth and the Demon King of Incarceration are extremely generous towards the humans. Even this city has to follow Helmuth's laws, so you can't do anything harsh to the visiting humans. Noor also nodded. That's right. Even when one of the night demons extracts the life force of a human through their dreams, it has to be part of a transaction, not a robbery. According to the law. And I'm saying that's the problem, Eugene cut Noir's words short once more. The current era is on the wrong course. Noir made a confused noise. This era which has made it legal for you, a demon folk, to prey on these humans in this whole city, it's all wrong, Eugene firmly stated. Noir's jaw dropped in blank shock at such terribly self-assured words. Of course, if you were a little more vicious and physically devoured the humans in this city, I would hate you even more and want to kill you. But just because you haven't done that doesn't mean I lack any hatred and murderous intent towards you, Eugene clarified. This time it was Noir's turn to be dumbstruck. Like you said, this is the filthiest place in the city. The smelliest, shittest, and most useless place. Eugene narrowed his eyes as he pointed towards the ceiling. Frankly, I don't think it would be much of a problem if this ceiling were to collapse and wipe out all these pieces of trash. Noir stayed silent. Eugene shook his head. However, if at all possible, I hope that you're the one who does it. Not me. But Noir calmly asked. Eugene explained, because I am a human and you are a demon folk. Oh my god. Noir smiled as she looked up into Eugenie's eyes. Shouldn't you be thinking of how to stop me before I do something like that? Hamel, you are the hero, aren't you? I have a lot of people that I need to save apart from these bastards, Eugene answered coldly. Noir hummed in thought. This was quite the cold-blooded answer coming from Eugene. As her smile deepened, Noir looked up at the ceiling. So it doesn't matter if everyone here in the abandoned railroad dies? If that's the case, then how about the people above? Giabella Park was the continent's foremost tourist destination. The number of people currently on the city's surface would be comparable to the total number of citizens in Kiel's capital city. Hamel, you said that you would come back to this city in order to kill me, didn't you? In the same fashion, I have always intended to draw you into my castle. In that case, this city will ultimately serve as a battlefield for the both of us, isn't that right? Noir asked. Eugene shrugged. I guess that will be the case. Oh my, Noir feigned a gasp. That means there might be countless casualties as a result of our battle. Eugene raised an eyebrow. Weren't you going to clear the city out first? After Eugene had asked this question in a tone that made it seem like he was just stating the obvious, Noir carefully responded, why should I? Because they'll be a distraction, Eugene stated bluntly. I don't feel like I would be distracted. I see you're right, Noir nodded in realization. According to Helmuth's laws, innocent casualties are strictly prohibited during conflicts between demon folk, but if you were to come here looking to kill me, the demon king of incarceration would be forced to declare a state of war, so would the law still be applied in that situation? I'm saying that I would be the one distracted, Eugene said exasperatedly. Do you really want to fight me while I'm hesitating, thinking about how to reduce the loss of life and not giving it my all? Moore was left speechless. Her eyes widened into circles, and after blinking a few times, she began to seriously consider the issue. She found herself wanting to see the sight of Hamel working hard to prevent any casualties while throwing himself in danger in order to save the lives of those completely unrelated to himself. However, her desire to see Hamel, who didn't have to care about such things and would only be staring at her while burning with murderous intent, was even stronger. I'll have the tourists sent out before you arrive, Noor had no choice but to promise. In any case, since she wasn't planning on capturing the tourists to act as hostages, there was no need to keep them confined to the city. Of course you will, Eugene muttered with a sour expression as he stepped past Noir. Noir was left staring at Eugenie's back as he headed back up the stairs, only to quickly walk after him. Where are you going? Noir asked. Eugene grunted to the surface. Noir kept questioning him why. Eugene returned the favor. Is there any reason why I should head further down into that smelly pit of trash? You came here specifically to see it, Noir argued. And now that I've seen it, there's no need to keep looking, Eugene snorted. Noor tried to keep the conversation going. In that case, are you heading back to Giabella Castle? Get lost, Eugene rudely rebuffed. There's no way I can do that, Noor said with a mischievous smile as she wrapped her arms around Eugene. Now that you're outside, come and play with me. Noor thought this was an opportunity to build up those memories that would later leave the survivor filled with regret. Chapter 432, Giabella City 7. Have you actually gone crazy? Eugene glared at Noir with a dumbfounded expression on his face. There was bullshit, and then there was what Noir had just said, which had gone far beyond anything that Eugene could comprehend. Play around? Together? How absurd. Until now, he had already become far more involved with Noir than he felt was necessary. Eugene no longer wanted any further entanglement with Noir, whether by doing things together, making shared memories, or sharing emotional connections. Was it because Eugene wanted to avoid any needless provocation from Noir? Of course, there was also that reason, but wasn't it strange in the first place to interact more than necessary with an enemy that you were determined to kill? Don't be like that, Noir said with a grin as she pulled on Eugenie's arms. Unlike her expression, tone, and attitude, her grip was so strong that even Eugene couldn't shake her off immediately. But this fact just left Eugene feeling even more dumbfounded. Just how much did Noir want to play around with him to put such a level of strength in her grip? Was this really something she should put such power into? Why are you being so clingy? Eugene complained. Well, who knows, why do you think I'm doing this? Noir said coyly. In fact, Noir herself couldn't figure out the exact reason for her current behavior. Until now, she had bothered Eugene like this many times before, but Noir had kept herself extremely cool-headed every time she did so. Although Noir had offered up Eugene a few lewd temptations, they had all been done jokingly, and whenever Eugene rejected her, she wouldn't linger on it for too long and knew when to step back. However, currently in a rare and strange case for her, Noir didn't want to do that. It's a strange feeling, Noir whispered to herself as she tilted her head in confusion. Still holding on firmly to Eugenie's arm, Noir pulled on it a little harder. As she buried Eugenie's rock-hard forearm into her chest, Noir licked her lips and said, Hamel, although there have been several times where I felt a strong desire for you now. Fufu, just why could this be? These current feelings are so strange and mysterious. Noir wondered why she was feeling this way. Her love for Hamel was something she had first started feeling 300 years ago, but it had never burned as strongly as it did now. Was it because he had grown up so delectably? Because he had become strong enough that he could truly make her feel the possibility of her own death? Or perhaps. Noir giggled to herself and whispered to him, now that I think about it, today is the full moon. Did you know that? Let go, Eugene just grunted. Almost all of the races of demon folk receive some influence from the full moon. Their dark power becomes stronger and so do their desires. Among the lower class of demon folk, there are even a few cases where they go berserk on the night of the full moon, Noir paused to let out a pitiless laugh. But that's just for the lower class, that's right, only the lower class. Such influence doesn't apply to those like us, and until now I have never experienced such a thing. However, today could it be that my excessive desire has caused me to regress? Eugene glared into Noir's eyes. The blatant emotions swirling within those eyes were familiar to him. These were the same emotions that Hamel had first seen when he met Noir Giabella 300 years ago. However, they also resembled the same emotions he had seen not so long ago. They were similar to the emotions that had filled the Twilight Witch's eyes when she looked at Agaroth. This realization just made Eugene feel annoyed and angry. Just like how Eugene Lionheart wasn't Agaroth, nor Giabella wasn't the Twilight Witch. Even though that should be the case, he couldn't deny that Noir's current emotions still bore a striking similarity to those of the Twilight Witch. Fwoosh! Black flames flickered to life around Eugene. His irritability and rage over his current situation drove him to seek out more violent measures to deal with Noir. Although he knew that he would only suffer an overwhelming loss if he were to clash with Noir this early, despite being aware of this, the fact that he had come into such skin-on-skin contact with Noir was causing him to tremble in disgust. "Do you really not want to play with me that much?" Noir asked with a pout. "It's not like we're close enough to skip around together while laughing merrily, now are we?" Eugene replied challengingly. "It depends on how you interpret playing around, but fine, I get it." "No need to be so angry, Hamel," Noir said as she let go of Eugenie's arm. But that was all she did. She didn't step back to give him more space. Still standing right next to Eugene, Noir smiled and said, "Then how about this? If you stay with me until the sun rises in the morning, I will answer any 3 questions you might have." Eugene eyed her suspiciously. "But I don't have anything I want to ask you?" Noir snickered. Hee, no need to tell such obvious lies, no? There's no way that after coming all the way to this city, you have nothing you are curious about. Also, have you already forgotten what you said to me earlier? Hamel, you did tell me that you were curious about my Giabella faces. At these words, Eugenie's face twisted as if he had just bitten into shit. Fine. He had indeed said those words to Noir just half a day ago. It hadn't been a lie either. Eugene honestly did want to figure out the true purpose of those mass-manufactured Giabella faces. However, he was not getting the urge to lie about it. He did want to ask Noir many questions, but he really wanted to lie and say there wasn't anything he needed to talk to her about. The reason for this was simple. Eugene just didn't want to be together with Noir right now. "Ha," Eugene said, letting out a sigh. He suppressed his turbulent emotions. Along with his surging killing intent, Eugene shoved it all down to the bottom of his chest. When he thought about it calmly and rationally, rejecting Noir's offer would be foolish. About 6 to 7 hours were left until the sun rose again in the morning. As long as he spent that much time with her, he would be able to ask the Queen of the Night Demons 3 questions. Fine, Eugene nodded in agreement while still keeping up his glare. As Noir had said, part of the reason he had come here to Giabella City was that he intended to investigate more information about her. "But instead of that, why don't you answer my questions first?" Eugene proposed. Noir gasped, "No way. You don't really think that I would just play around with you and then run away without answering, do you? Isn't that a possibility?" Eugene frowned. "Well, now, looking at it from my perspective, Hamel, it seems more likely that you would just listen to my answers first and then leave on your own," Noir said with a pout as she examined Eugenie's expression. She noticed how cold Eugenie's eyes were. His eyes and expression had always looked frosty, but strangely enough, they seemed more so today than they had ever been before. "It's not just me," Noir thought, gradually realizing that her current self was slightly different from how she usually was. And likewise, she had also realized that Eugene was also behaving differently from usual. Just what on earth was causing such a change? Was it truly the full moon? No, there was no way that would be the case. Noir chuckled as she wound a strand of her hair around her fingers. "Look at you not replying to my words. How annoying. Even so, Hamel, I've decided to trust you. Though if you do betray me, my anger will be just as sincere as my trust in you." Noir placed a strange emphasis on the word betray as she smiled at him with her eyes. "Since our time is so precious, let's do the questions and answers on our way up, alright? Down here, the despair of these losers and the stench coming from the filth and garbage all smell so terrible." Noir set off without waiting for his reply. Eugene glared at Noir's back as she headed up the stairs in front of him, then he followed behind her with a heavy sigh. "Fine then, so what exactly is going on with those stupid heads?" Eugene asked her. Noir corrected him, "They're called Giabella faces, not stupid heads." Eugene pressed the question, "So, what exactly are they?" "Hee, it seems that you really were quite curious about it. How fortunate that I didn't answer you when you asked earlier," Noir chuckled before waving her finger. At this gesture, Noir's robes, which had seemed to be made out of rags, disappeared. This left Noir standing only in her underwear momentarily, and Eugene reflexively turned his gaze to the side. Noir revealed, the 3 Giabella faces are basically meant to extend the range of my demon eye. Hamel, you saw it too, didn't you? I already knew that from the very beginning, Eugene complained. Are there any idiots who come to this city without knowing that? The Giabella showtime was a specialty of this city. It didn't have a set schedule. Instead, its appearance depended on Noir's mood. A dream created by the Queen of the Night Demons herself was something that couldn't be bought even with hundreds of millions of sals. When the mouth of the Giabella faces, which were floating in the skies above this city, opened up, the moment that the Queen declared showtime, the power of her demon eye of fantasy would be spread through the light shining from the Giabella face's eyes. It's already absurd that you're able to use the power of your demon eye of fantasy through something other than your own 2 eyes. But why are there 3 of them? Eugene asked. Absurd? Noir repeated. Hamel, you can't use such a word so lightly. Now, there is almost nothing that is truly impossible for someone like me. What? Eugene furrowed his brow. Just how much life force do you think this city has supplied me so far? Noir said evasively, glancing back over her shoulder at Eugene with a smile. In fact, there's no need for me to specify so far. Can you even imagine how much life force Giabella Park supplies in just a single day like today? Eugene couldn't come up with a response, because it was absolutely impossible to estimate just how huge such an amount was. To be honest, Hamel, the life force supplied by this city can't provide me with any meaningful increases in power. I've already surpassed the line that can be reached by receiving life force and converting it into dark power, Noir boasted. Her words were arrogant, but Eugene didn't doubt their truthfulness. Even Iris had obtained near-infinite dark power immediately after becoming a demon king, but it was how someone used such overwhelming power that truly determined their level of threat. In the end, what the demon eye of fantasy shows you is just an illusion. It can't actually alter reality. However, let me just say this, Hamel. The current me can do far more than that, Noir tantalizingly revealed. Just what are you saying? Eugene asked suspiciously after a pause. I'm saying that I've made this whole city into a dream. Noir tilted her head as she stared at Eugene. Don't you think that it's strange, Hamel? During the whole time that you and I were on the stairs leading down into the abandoned railroad, not a single one of those pieces of trash below seemed to look up at us. Eugene silently processed this. Noir also pointed out that's the case even now. We are walking through the subway of the city without a night, right? But why is there no one here? At these words, Eugene came to a halt. Just earlier, when he was heading down towards the abandoned railroad, the subway had been crowded with people. However, now there was no one here. Could he have entered a dream without even realizing it? No, there was no way that could have happened. Eugene was sure that the place he was now in wasn't a dream but reality. Clack-clank, clack-clank. He could hear the sound of a train rattling away in the distance. While focusing on that sound, Eugene kept trying to expand his senses. He could sense the presence of countless people coming from further around them, but it was only in their immediate vicinity that there was an absence of people. Have you placed a suggestion throughout the whole area? Eugene voiced his suspicions. That's right, Noir nodded while smiling. The 3 Giabella faces floating in the sky are able to circulate the life force supplied by the city throughout the whole area. Thanks to that, I am getting stronger with every day that passes. Instead of using this supply of life force to increase my dark power, I'm going in a different direction. This city, which is under my complete control, will gradually become part of my dream instead of remaining a part of reality. Then I can collapse the boundary between dreams and reality. Eugenie's expression hardened as he worked through what these words actually meant. As Noir had said, the boundary between dreams and reality was to completely collapse, then this whole space, this entire city, would become part of Noir Giabella's dream. Even if one were able to resist falling asleep, all of reality could still be used as a weapon to attack oneself. The unavoidable weakness of the demon eye of fantasy was that, in the end, it was just a fantasy. No matter how strong of a psychological suggestion was woven into the dream, reality itself wouldn't change. So even if Noir showed Eugene all sorts of ridiculous fantasies, Eugene was confident that he wouldn't be deceived by any of them. His will was strong, and he believed that as long as he strengthened his divine power and overall divinity, he would definitely be able to resist whatever tricks she might pull. However, if the boundary between dreams and reality did collapse, that would mean that the demon eye of fantasy wouldn't have any weakness. Within the confines of this city, Giabella's power would reach a level of literal omnipotence. And the spearhead that would allow her to realize such an incredulous ideal were those three stupid-looking heads. What if I were to destroy them now? Eugene silently considered. It would be useless to try to destroy them, Noor said as if she had just read Eugenie's mind. If they are destroyed, I can just remake them. Or perhaps I could fly up into the sky and handle the circulation myself. They didn't encounter anyone else while leaving the subway, but the streets were crowded with people as they headed into the night. However, even among these people, none turned to look at Eugene and Noir. Noir tried to reassure him, there's no point in worrying about it just yet, Hamel. Because the process still isn't complete. Right now, the only things possible to demonstrate would be things like slight changes in perception. Although Noir tried to say it like it wasn't a big deal, Eugene couldn't just accept this at face value. He had seen how the numerous individuals in the abandoned railroad hadn't been able to look at them directly, and instead, all began to look up at the ceiling as if it was only natural for them to do so. There hadn't been anyone around them in the subway either. And even now, no one in their immediate vicinity was looking at Eugene and Noir. Presently, Noir wasn't using her demon eye of fantasy, and Eugene wasn't being shown some kind of dream either. It seemed that a suggestion was laid over the entire area that naturally diverted attention away from them. I feel like that's enough to answer your question about the Giabella faces. What are your other questions? Noir prompted. I'm still thinking of some, Eugene replied, suppressing the urge to sigh. Eugene had originally wanted to investigate what kind of security forces or private guards were serving Noir. When he next came here to kill her, he didn't want to get caught off guard when her reinforcements came pouring in. However, at this point something like that was no longer at a level that was worth worrying about. Would Holy Ground be able to resist her power? Eugene wondered. Invasions into his mind and being dragged into a dream could both be resisted through his mental power and divinity. But would Holy Ground be able to resist her direct manipulations of reality? Eugene didn't believe that such a situation would be necessarily hopeless. Eugene also had many measures that he could take in response. Even if the boundary between dreams and reality collapsed and this entire city became a territory over which Noir reigned, in the truest sense of the word, Holy Ground could turn an area into a land controlled personally by a god. In fact, there was a simple solution to the whole problem. Eugene just didn't have to fight Noir while in this city. There's no reason for me to play to her strengths, Eugene thought before spitting out with a scowl. So where are we going now? Does that count as one of your questions? Noir asked cheekily. Should I just stay silent then? Eugene countered. It was just a little joke, Hamel. I also want to keep talking with you, so of course I won't be too harsh about the conditions of our agreement. Fine then, how about this? If you raise your hand and shout question, it's only then that the question will be counted. Noir raised 2 fingers and waved them at him. You have 2 questions left starting now. Eugene repeated the question. So like I said, where are we going? We're heading to the Giabella department store, Noir revealed. Do you even know what time it is right now? Eugene protested. What's so important about the time? Hamel, this is the city without a night, Noir reminded him. As she said this, she casually tried to hook her arms around his, but Eugene quickly sidestepped her, keeping his distance from Noir. Just what on earth are you going there to buy? Eugene asked. Noir sighed. Do you really only go shopping when there's something that you need to buy? It's fun to just take a look around. Never mind. There are actually a few things that I want to buy right now. I also feel like it would make me really happy if you could pick out some clothes for me. Get lost, Eugene scoffed. I knew that would be your response, Noir said with a shrug. Doesn't matter. I already have a whole lot of clothes, so I don't really need to buy any more. Eugene frowned. Then why? How about a ring? Noir spoke over him, holding her fingers up against the sparkling stars in the sky. I really want a new ring. Chapter 433, Giabella City 8. Eugene's face twisted when he heard the word ring. Why would she suddenly bring that up out of the blue? Eugene was just about to let out a curse, but a sudden thought passing through his head caused him to flinch. Could it be that memories from her past life, which hadn't completely been erased and had instead been buried somewhere deep, had suddenly pricked her heart? A ring, Eugene thought. He recalled the final moments of the Twilight Witch. Agaroth had given her his ring, his holy relic, and ordered her to flee. However, the Twilight Witch had rejected his divine commandment. Instead of accepting the ring, she had returned it and then requested a kiss and expressed her last wish to be able to die at his hands. After snapping her neck with his own hands, Agaroth had placed his ring on the Twilight Witch's chest. Then he had turned his back on her corpse and went to face the Demon King of Destruction. What could have happened to the ring after that? The world had been destroyed. A fog followed by a giant wave had engulfed the whole world, leaving only corpses in its wake. After that, a long time had passed. Although the details weren't fully known, the world was reborn once more. Perhaps the ring had been buried deep beneath the sea, or maybe it was carried along by the ocean currents. Eventually, the ring had fallen into the hands of a dragon before it had been fatefully returned to Eugene. Why a ring of all things? Eugene eventually asked. There was no way that Noir Giabella could have retained any memories of her life as the Twilight Witch. No matter the fact that Noir Giabella was a being who possessed truly absurd levels of power, there was no way she could still have memories of her past life, which had ended with her previous death. Who knows? Noir said with a shrug. It was just as Eugene had guessed. Noir really didn't have any memories of her past life. She didn't remember Agaroth's name, the Twilight Witch, or anything at all really. However, after seeing how Eugene's divinity had grown stronger and more distinct, her soul had just seemed to react on its own. Even then, her soul hadn't awoken any clear memories or even the broken fragments of a memory. It was just a feeling. A very vague and fleeting feeling. Noir felt an inexplicable desire to possess a ring. She simply couldn't tell why she was having such an unusual feeling. Why a ring of all things? Noir repeated. I wonder why. Earlier, I just suddenly had the thought that I wanted one. When she thought about it, most of the emotions that had come over her today were sudden and impulsive. However, Noir didn't think that this was particularly strange, because she had always been like that. She was the queen of the night demons. She had already been impulsive, lustful, and emotional for the past hundreds of years now. That's right, come to think of it, Hamel. Noir turned to look at Eugene, having suddenly realized something. Didn't you also wear a ring? Noir was also able to clearly recall what kind of ring it was. Eugene had worn that ring on the ring finger of his left hand. It was no ordinary ring. Noir hadn't known what its exact identity was, but she had guessed it was probably a genuine artifact. It wasn't an item that had been enchanted with magic either, but instead, a holy relic with connections to an ancient god. A ring. Eugene feigned ignorance. Are you really pretending to have forgotten about it? I'm talking about the ring that was destroyed in your battle with Iris. It had the ability to heal injuries, Noir reminded him with a grin. Noir could clearly remember seeing it at that time as she watched Eugene and Iris fight. Instead of replying, Eugene just glared directly into Noir's face. Right now, Eugene was experiencing a huge inner turmoil. This was because of Noir's desire to own a ring and also because he couldn't fully see through her intention to ask about Agaroth's ring. There was no way. He didn't think it was even possible, but could it be that Noir really had recalled her past life? Were her current actions prompted by those recollected memories? No way, there's no way, Eugene tried to convince himself over and over again. In the first place, if Noir really had managed to remember, she would have addressed it head-on instead of probing around indirectly like this. Eugene calmed his inner turmoil and began to speak. I'm not pretending to have forgotten. It's just that you started asking about my ring without any warning. Is that so? Noir said doubtfully. It just suddenly occurred to me. Since I've decided to get a ring, I thought it would be nice if I could get one similar to yours. That's right. This actually works out for the best. How about it? Should we get an identical pair of rings? Although she had just come up with the idea herself, Noir couldn't help but picture the beautiful and wonderful image that would make. Noir turned to look at Eugene, both eyes sparkling with light as Eugene's face instinctively twisted into a disgusted scowl. Eugene began. Only for Noir to interrupt him. You're going to say that I'm crazy, right? Foo-foo, Hamel, I can already predict everything you're going to say. Of course you don't want to wear the same ring as me. Noir walked past Eugene, her hips swaying as if she was dancing. While staring down at Eugene's completely bare hands, she laughed and said, I also feel like it would be fun to try and force it onto your finger. Don't make that face, Hamel. I'm not going to try and force it on you now, you know? I'm saving that for later. That's right, for later. When you eventually die in my arms. Eugene held his tongue and the mounting irritation. Noir smiled brightly. At that moment, I will put the ring on your finger as you die in the throes of your own despair. As I slip it on, I will whisper into your ear and say, I love you. Crazy bitch, Eugene cursed. But I think that would be quite a beautiful and romantic gesture, no? Of course you won't want to accept that ring, but Fufu, at such a moment you won't even have the strength to refuse it. What do you think, Hamel? And I really do mean if, when the two of us reunite to try and kill each other, if in the end you are the one who emerges victorious. Noir tilted her head to the side as she looked up at Eugene. Beneath her long and thick eyelashes, Noir's purple eyes, which were as beautiful as jewels, sparkled with intense anticipation. You and I, at the moment when our long relationship comes to an end, is there anything that you would want to give me as a final gift? Noir asked. There's nothing, Eugene flatly denied. Even if I say it as my last wish? Noir pouted. It doesn't matter to me what your last wishes are, Eugene answered with a surly expression. Noir snorted. Well, I also predicted that response. Eugene couldn't sense any real disappointment coming from her. Even if Eugene wasn't going to prepare a gift to commemorate her final moments, couldn't Noir herself just prepare one for him to give her? Since she had already decided to buy a ring, Noir decided to just buy a pair at the same time. Then when she someday killed Hamel, I will place the ring on my own hand. Then I will place the other ring on your hand as you lie there dying. Also, after you die, I will remember you for all eternity each time I look at the ring on my finger, Noir said dreamily. Eugene silently scowled. If you do win, then I hope you would do the same thing that I would, Noir said, looking at Eugene with a bright smile. Eugene found himself unable to face that smile directly. He also didn't feel any desire to keep staring at it either. He didn't think that there were any other intentions hidden behind all of the words that Noir had just spouted, but even so, as Eugene listened to her speak, it felt like something heavy and sharp was landing in his heart. Stop talking nonsense and let's go already, Eugene said gruffly after a slight pause. It's taking so long because we're walking there, Noir explained. If we had taken the train or a taxi, we would have already arrived a long time ago. Although she said this, Noir had no intention of taking any transportation. Instead, Noir slowed down her walking pace so that she was now shoulder to shoulder with Eugene. The street ahead was sparkling with light. At present, all the streetlights in Giabella City had been adjusted to their most beautiful colors such that these beautiful lights surrounded Eugene and Noir. Naturally, this wasn't all just a coincidence. It was all due to the Giabella faces in the sky that were connected to Noir. Thanks to the system that managed the entire city, Noir could manipulate her surroundings according to her will. On top of that, since all of the people who had been influenced by Noir's suggestion were keeping their distance, the entire city seemed to have become a world just for Noir and Eugene. Do you want to link arms together? Noir asked shyly, her cheeks blushing in an obvious show as she extended one hand towards Eugene. Naturally, Eugene just retorted with a grim expression, get lost. Asterisk. The saint of the god of war. The Twilight Witch. She may have had a real name, but there was no way for Eugene to find out what that name had been. This may have been because all of Agarotha's memories that had reawakened in Eugene's mind while he was in the Ragurayan were very fragmented and vague, but Eugene also felt like there might be other reasons apart from that. Within the memories that Eugene had recalled at that time, Agaroth wasn't the only character present in the memories. There had been many other people besides Agaroth. However, the only one with an actual name was Agaroth himself. Even the Great Warrior, Agarotha's oldest friend, was only known as the Great Warrior. And the saint who had been someone special to Agaroth was also only remembered as the saint and the Twilight Witch. It wasn't just the humans. The other gods that Agaroth had respected and relied on to some extent were also remembered by their titles as the Sage and the God of Giants. Perhaps Agaroth was just a person with a mental disorder who couldn't even remember the names of anyone other than himself, but Eugene thought that there was little chance of that actually being the case. Eugene thought to himself, it feels like my subconscious may have rejected recalling their names. For now, that was the only guess he could come up with. Eugene didn't want to accept the emotional influences that came with Agarotha's memories. He wanted to keep the self of the current era distinct from who he might have been in the ancient era. Eugene felt like that desire may have influenced the memories he had reawakened. It hadn't fully worked. If he really truly wanted to keep his sense of self distinct, then all of Agarotha's emotions should have been stripped from those memories. Of course, if that had happened, it may have been difficult to fully inherit those memories. Even though their names were forgotten, Eugene could remember everything else in great detail. The saint of the god of war, the Twilight Witch, had been a beautiful woman. She had grown her beautiful orange hair long, its color reminiscent of a vibrant sunset, and she had sky-blue eyes that didn't belong to either day or night but were more of a dusky hue. Her face didn't resemble Noir's at all. If he examined her personality in detail, there were many differences between the two. However, there were similarities in the way that they would openly flirt with him, often sought skinship and liked to whisper into his ear. Even if you're reincarnated, does your true nature remain the same? Eugene's brow furrowed as he thought about this. Noir and Eugene were currently in a department store located on the border between Fantasy Square and Gamble Square. They were on a VIP floor that dealt solely in expensive and luxury goods that couldn't even be entered unless you possessed a considerable amount of wealth. Even though it was a VIP floor, there were actually quite a lot of people having fun shopping when they arrived. There were nobles from all over the continent, a few royal family members from smaller countries, and even a couple of the demon folk of Helmuth. No way. Is that really Eugene Lionheart? Even though they were causing quite a spectacle and drawing the eyes of everyone present, could Noir really intend for them to just keep shopping here regardless? Feeling annoyed, Eugene shifted his gaze towards a target. Although many pairs of eyes were blatantly staring at him and whispering, the one that really bothered Eugene belonged to one of the demon folks. Said demon folk was a baron. This wasn't a very high-ranking title, but this baron was said to possess quite a prosperous fief by Helmuth's standards. For those in possession of such a territory, most would have likely lost control of it in a territorial battle with other demon folk. Still, in the case of this baron, he was able to maintain his ownership of his territory by getting other higher-ranking demon folk to extend ties of fealty towards him in exchange for material support. As Eugene silently unleashed his killing intent toward the man, the blood began to drain from the baron's bright red face as he turned slightly pale. Eugene rolled his shoulders, glared at the retreating baron, and spoke in a loud voice that was meant to be overheard. Isn't the very presence of a bastard who looks that ugly an obstruction of business? The baron's appearance indeed was hideous. His hide was red, he had 3 eyes, and he had goat legs in place of his lower body. Although Eugene was openly hurling insults at him, the baron did not respond and merely departed from the floor. The baron wasn't the only one frightened off by Eugene's irritation. The other guests on the VIP floor stopped whispering and kept their mouths shut, acting as if they hadn't just been gossiping earlier. Even with that, Eugene's mood didn't improve. As long as they can pay, all customers are equal, Noir said with a considering hum as she stretched out all 10 fingers. Of course, I also have to admit that Baron Horst does look hideous. However, even that hideousness can become a unique aesthetic as long as he has enough money. Eugene complained, "Why haven't you covered this area in your suggestion?" Noir smiled, "It's all for your sake, Eugene." Since there were ears listening from all around them, Noir didn't call Eugene by his other name, Hamel. This was also a fortunate thing for all of the customers in the department store. If Noir had made a slip of the tongue and said the name Hamel, Eugene would have had to capture or kill everyone around them to stop the rumor from spreading. As the kind person that I am, allow me to directly inform you. Baron Horst has donated money to several other demon folk, and included among those are a few of the demon folk who have crawled into the desert. Noir tore her eyes away from her fingers to take a look at Eugene's face. With a smile, she continued, "Baron Horst will be sure to convey your situation in a very natural manner." By my situation, are you talking about how I, the hero, and you, Noir Giabella, came here, just the two of us, to buy rings? Eugene hissed while trying to keep his insides from boiling over in rage. At these words, Noir let out a cackle and nodded, "That's right. And if these facts were to become known, how exactly would that help my position?" Eugene growled. "Who knows? No matter what, something will change, right?" Noir gave an awkward cough. "Ahem, first of all, let me make this clear. Did you know that Amelia Merwin doesn't like me all that much? And I don't really like Amelia Merwin either. In fact, we both hate each other. And you, Eugene, you hate her as well." Eugene stayed silent. "Well, you've heard the phrase, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, haven't you? I'm sure that Amelia Merwin will have no choice but to feel upset when she learns that we're close enough to buy rings together," Noir tried to convince Eugene. Eugene eyed her suspiciously. "Are you being serious right now?" "Hey, of course I'm not being serious. I'm just talking for the sake of talking," Noir said, sticking out her tongue with a playful smile. Eugene suppressed the thought of going up to her that very moment and kicking her in the chin, thus chopping off said tongue. If you're done looking around, can we head out already? Eugene asked impatiently. Why are you in such a rush? After all, the night is still long. Also, Eugene, if we leave now, it's not like there's anything else for us to do, no? Noir pointed out, wriggling her fingers as she looked at Eugene. Perhaps realizing what it meant for a gaze to feel like it was burning. Eugene was so disturbed that he started getting goosebumps. Of course, Noir slowly drew out. I could make this long night seem to last for both a moment and an eternity. Eugene, no matter how arrogant you may act when you climb into my bed, Growling, Eugene growled in the back of his throat. Noir sniffed. I could have made sure for you to not have any regrets. Fine, I won't say anything more about taking you to my bed, but instead, come here and stand next to me. I can see everything clearly from right here, Eugene insisted. Even if that's the case, it would still be better to see it from up close, right? After all, this has to do with the final moments of both of our lives, so I don't want to make the choice all by myself, Noir said persuasively. You're just going to do what you want anyway, Eugene said, not moving from his spot. All 10 of Noir's fingers now had rings adorning them, and she had already spent quite some time picking out these rings. Moreover, these 10 were left after Noir had extensively pruned her selection. Even going back just a few dozen minutes, Noir had been considering dozens of different rings. These 10 rings were what had been left after a long and lengthy filtering process. They all had similar shapes. None of them had any large jewels embedded into them, but that didn't mean they couldn't have a few smaller jewels used in their design. Most of the rings had simple designs without much embellishment. Honestly speaking, they were all ordinary-looking rings that were difficult to distinguish from each other at first glance. They seem a bit too plain for you, Eugene eventually gave his opinion. Right? I think so as well, Noir agreed. Then you should just choose something different, Eugene suggested. However, for some reason I feel like I'm being drawn to rings like these, Noir muttered, tilting her head to the side in confusion. After continuing to think about it like this for some time, Noir made up her mind and chose one of the rings. The ring that Noir chose was a gold ring that gave off a soft glow. She nodded her head with a satisfied expression. Noir turned to him. Eugene, you should try wearing one as well, since it will need to be able to fit on your finger. Eugene scowled. You're going to say, get lost, aren't you? Noir spoke over him. Fine, I get it. I'll make the choice on my own. Even without you wearing it personally, I can roughly tell what your ring size is just by looking at your fingers, you know? In fact, there's no need to even measure it. It's not like this is some cheap ring, so it will be able to adjust to the circumference of your finger no matter which finger it is put on. Noir clapped her hands and one of the waiting staff stepped forward. There's no need to wrap the rings up. We'll take them away like this, Noir instructed. If you desire it, we can also engrave the rings, Your Highness, the staff offered. Engrave? An engraving, Noir pondered the possibility for a few moments before smiling and shaking her head. I'll just do it myself. Noir could have had the store engrave Eugene's name onto her ring, but rather than that name she wanted to engrave the name Hamel, instead. The rings floated above her palm as they were wrapped up in layers of her dark power. It didn't take much time to engrave his name on the inside of one of the rings. This one is mine, Noir said with a bright smile as she held her ring up towards Eugene. The name, Hamel Dinah's, was written on the inside of the small ring that was sized to fit around Noir's ring finger. And this one is yours, Noir said, holding up the other ring. This one had the name, Noir Giabella, engraved on the inside. While watching as Eugene's expression twisted, Noir giggled and placed her ring onto the ring finger of her left hand. I'll keep your ring with me, Noir informed him. Because if I give it to you, you will definitely just throw it away. Her long, outstretched fingers pulled out a strand of her own hair. The broken strand of hair was pulled through Hamel's ring and turned into a black necklace. In fact, Noir wanted Eugene to hang this necklace around her neck, but Noir was well aware that there was no way the man would be willing to do so. So she hung the necklace around her neck with her own hands as she walked over towards Eugene. Let's go, Noir said. Where to? Eugene asked. Noir smiled. Since we've already come to the department store, wouldn't it be a shame to end our shopping trip and return after just buying some rings? Isn't there anything that you want me to buy for you? There's nothing, Eugene flatly denied. I feel like those two kids have a lot of things they might want though, Noor teased. I'm also very wealthy, Eugene said defensively. But there are some things that even money can't buy, Noor said as she walked past Eugene. Although he didn't have any desire to follow her, in the current situation, Eugene had no choice but to do so. Eventually, Eugene let out a sigh and followed Noir out of the store. Chapter 434. Giabella City 9. Bonus images. Eugene wandered around the department store, getting pulled to wherever Noir wanted to go. To be honest, he tried to keep his distance so that he wasn't considered part of the same group as her, but Noir wouldn't allow him to play such a trick. With a mischievous smile, she would call Eugene's name out loud, get close to him and pull on his arms as she clung to him. After this was repeated several times in a row, Eugene eventually just gave up. While keeping half his attention on following Noir around carrying her luggage, Eugene was rolling a few ideas over in his head. He was thinking about his remaining 2 questions. What kind of questions would be the most meaningful? As planned, should he ask about the private army she might be harboring? No, there wasn't much meaning in doing so. To be honest, Eugene wouldn't really be surprised if something like that did pop up when he returned to this city. But no matter how many troops were stationed here in the end, the biggest challenge was Noor Giabella herself. I also feel like it would be a good idea to turn the investigation towards the Demon King of Incarceration or Gavid Lindman, Eugene considered. For example, he could ask her for the Demon King of Incarceration's weak point. Eugene unconsciously laughed as this thought popped into his head. The Demon King's weak point? Could there even be such a thing? Even if it did exist, Eugene didn't think it was likely that Noir would know about it. What kind of thought is leaving you so distracted? Noir asked curiously. I'm thinking about what to ask you, Eugene answered with a blunt demeanor. Eugene was getting annoyed by the music flowing in his ears. Instead of listening to such music, Eugene even thought that it would have been better to just keep wandering around the department store while shopping. At least there he had been able to keep moving. However, now Eugene was forced to just sit in place. After they had finished shopping, Noir and Eugene had arrived here at a bar with a nice atmosphere, the soft sound of music in the background, accompanied by the rustling of cocktail shakers. Eugene and Noir were sitting in a corner seat facing each other. You don't need to ask them all today. It's fine if you just ask me next time, Noir said with a laugh as she shook her drink. There was also a drink set in front of Eugene, but he had yet to pick it up. By now, the night had already started to give way to dawn, and the sun would rise in just a few hours. Eugene harshly rejected her. I have no intention of hanging out with you ever again. You really are such a consistent person. I actually like that about you, but as a date you aren't fun at all, Noir complained. A date? Eugene repeated. Noir smiled teasingly. If what you and I are doing now isn't a date, what else could it be? He didn't have any energy left to try and refute her. Eugene let out a heavy sigh as he idly tapped his drink with his fingertips. I don't understand you, Eugene confessed. Oh, I'm so happy, Hamel, Noir said cheerily. It seems you're finally willing to converse with me? Eugene didn't show any reaction to Noir's outburst. He just raised his head and stared straight at her. He saw a smile on Noir's face, which was illuminated by the warm colors of the lights above. Instead of saying anything, she also just waited for Eugene to speak. Conversation, huh? Maybe, but I'm more in the mood to air some grievances, Eugene muttered as he picked up his glass. Noir felt moved by this action, and her lips stretched into a wide smile as she asked, Hamel, are you actually willing to drink with me? Eugene denied this. I just want to drink because I'm feeling like shit. So that's the case. Understood. Hamel, you can just keep drinking alone like that, and I will also keep drinking here by myself. Even though we're sitting across from each other like this, we're not actually drinking together, Noy said with a giggle as she raised her glass. Her drink casually approached his to try to clink their glasses together, but Eugene ignored her approach and just poured his drink straight into his mouth. Noir returned to the topic. So then, Hamel, what is it that you don't understand about me? Everything, Eugene replied. When Eugene lowered his empty glass, Noir promptly picked up a bottle and refilled it as if she had just been waiting for the chance to do so. As a strong tan-colored liquor filled his glass about halfway, Eugene didn't bother trying to stop her. Like why you keep fucking with me, Eugene specified. That's because I love you, Noir claimed. Eugene added, I also don't understand all the effort you've put into this city. Hee, you don't understand it? I'm the one who doesn't understand what you mean by those words, Hamel. Haven't I already told you what this city is for? In that case, isn't it only natural that I put in my best effort to develop this city? Moore asked as she leaned over towards him. The new dress she had changed into had a low-necked design, so when she bent over like this, her cleavage was clearly visible. However, rather than her cleavage, Eugene's gaze was drawn to the necklace swaying above it and the ring on the said necklace. I have seen your city, Eugene said, and it is overflowing with an incomprehensible level of narcissism. So much so that most of the things within this city have your name attached to it. The city's name was Giabella City. Its theme park was named Giabella Park. The flying heads were called Giabella Faces, and even the castle's name was Giabella Castle. The only exception was the trains named the Dream Trains, but, apart from those, countless other things still had been named after Giabella. It's said to be the greatest tourist destination in the entire continent, and it is indeed crowded with people. I also saw a lot of young children, Eugene observed. Ah, Noir's eyes widened as if she had realized what Eugene was trying to say. Are you going to ask if I perhaps feel guilty? I don't necessarily want to focus on just that emotion, Eugene said vaguely. Sorrow then, Noir said with a giggle. Or perhaps regret. Something like that. Without responding, Eugene just glared at Noir. Eugene was well acquainted with the demon folk. Or at least that was what he had thought. However, after seeing Helmuth in the present era, he sometimes doubted himself and wondered if he really did know them all that well. During the era of war, the demon folk were the enemy. There was no other way that they could be defined. In that era, for the humans, the demon folk were enemies that needed to be fought at all costs. In order to achieve peace, the demon kings needed to be slain and the demon folk were to be driven back. However, were all demon folk really just enemies? In that regard, neither Eugene nor Hamel could be certain that that was absolutely the case. In the end, the demon folks were just another race, so among the countless demon folk, perhaps there were a few demon folk that didn't want to harm humans and were friendly towards humans. There had been no need to dwell on that thought at that time. That was because they were in the middle of a war. Rather than trying to distinguish between good demon folk and bad demon folk, Hamel had thought that it would be better to just consider all demon folk as the enemy and kill every single demon folk he encountered. The present era was different. It was an era of peace. 300 years had passed since the war. Should all the demon folk born in this era of peace still be considered enemies? Were the demon folk born into this era's Helmuth Empire, who got along well with the immigrating humans as if it was only natural, and who bore goodwill towards humans, really enemies? Someday war would break out. Eugene didn't think that he had much longer to wait until then. He could actually bring a start to the war right at this very moment. If he were to attack Babel right now without thinking of the consequences, the demon king of incarceration would surely order an end to the peace the oath had secured for the past 300 years. Are you thinking about the gap between your memories from 300 years ago and the present era? Moore asked as light shimmered from her purple eyes. She couldn't read Eugene's mind. Moore wasn't even able to dive into his consciousness and peek into his inner thoughts. Nevertheless, Moore could see through what Eugene was thinking and trying to say. You're thinking that the world has changed from what you knew of it 300 years ago, Moore said as she leaned back into her sofa, burying her body deeper into the cushions as she brought her drink to her lips. Now that we've been rehabilitated, you're wondering if we truly need to be enemies. That is what you're thinking, right? Something like that, Eugene admitted. This wasn't a problem that Eugene could just ignore completely. Once the oath came to an end and the demon king of incarceration declared war, a significant number of demon folk would be willing to go to war immediately. In particular, the high-ranking demon folk who had survived since the war era were sure to be overjoyed and would definitely leap headfirst into the war. Even now, many of those demon folk who couldn't wait for the coming war had already hopped over into the desert. However, would all demon folk agree to join the war? Wouldn't there be some demon folk who had become stained by the peace that had lasted for the past 300 years? Perhaps the demon folk born into an era where peace was taken for granted might not wish for war. As the master of this city, there was an unending stream of tourists who chanted Noir's name in worship every single day. Of all the demon folk who were seen as the most familiar with and closest to humans, Noir was supreme even among them. So Eugene wanted to figure out what exactly it was that she wanted. Eugene readied his second question. Apart from how it has to do with me, how do you see the Noor had burst into laughter even before Eugene had finished speaking. She took a sip of her drink before lowering it to stare at Eugene. Beginning from now, my answer will count as burning one of the 2 remaining questions you have left, Noor warned him. Eugene waited silently. In return, that means I will make sure to answer you seriously without a single lie, Noor promised. Eugene nodded his head without making any protest. He didn't have anything in particular he wanted to ask right now, so he thought that if he could hear some of Noor Giabella's true feelings, it might be a worthwhile trade. Allow me to say this, Hamel. The smile slowly disappeared from Noir's face as she began to speak. Whether it is guilt, sorrow, or regret, I have always wanted to be able to experience those sorts of emotions. Eugene pursed his lips. Every single one of the guests who make their way to this city has a desire in their heart. Whether it's a man, woman, child, or elder, they're all the same. They come to this city to fulfill their desires, to satisfy their dreams, and to come up with new dreams to pursue. Noir's lips twitched in a small smile. That's all there is to it. That is all they want from me, and in return that is all I want from them. Right now I am able to interact with them because they have something that I want, but if they don't have anything... Hamel, you should probably be happy with this answer, right? Noir's voice grew softer. If everyone who came to this city were to die while hating me, that would instead just make me happier. Noir was right. That was the answer that Eugene had wanted from her. He had hoped that the Queen of the Night Demons hadn't really changed over the past 300 years. He had hoped that this era of peace hadn't left a single mark on her. Noor shook her head. A war? Ah, that's right, a war probably will break out. Though it's a question of whether the war will come first or if, between you and I, one of us dies first. This feels like an issue that I will have to give some thought to. If I were to kill you, would the Demon King of Incarceration declare a war? Who knows? Eugene shrugged. Noir smiled. In that case, let's make an assumption. What would happen if the Demon King of Incarceration were to declare war while both you and I are still alive? There probably will be quite a few demon folk who won't agree with the war. That was also the case 300 years ago. However, is there even a need to factor them in? The demon folk who don't want war will just retreat on their own. As for me, naturally I will be on the front lines. Noir actually quite liked this side of Hamel. The man in front of her seemed self-centered and emotional, but surprisingly he actually wasn't. His actions that seemed emotional always had their own logic and reasoning behind them. His every action and choice always required at least some basis and justification for them. Knowing this aspect of his character, Noir tried to fulfill Eugene's expectations. No matter what, it felt like Eugene was afraid that the enemy he should hate had somehow changed. As the master of this city, Noir was adored by countless people. Eugene seemed worried that Noir may have become stained by that love and had come to love humans in the same way that they did her. This was a pointless worry. It was fundamentally wrong. Noir did not love humans, but neither did she love demon folk. The only 2 things she loved were herself as Noir Giabella and Hamel. Hamel, I am just me. The Noir Giabella that you have always known. Though perhaps you don't actually know me all that well. Even so, it's not like there's a problem with that now, is there? I can assure you of this much. I am the enemy that you must kill. If you think otherwise or have any doubts, then I am willing to prove that I am still your enemy, Noir warned him. Noir thought that Hamel seemed a little strange after he had arrived here in Giabella City. Until now she had never once seen him waver, but after arriving in this city she had seen Hamel doubt himself several times. Was it because of gaps in his memory? Could that really be all there was to it? Noir couldn't be sure of the exact answer to that, but she actually found his hesitance quite lovable. She didn't know what side of her he had seen or what kind of illusion he may have had of her that was causing him to feel such self-doubt. However, the fact that he would have more burdens weighing down his heart when he fought with her would only add extra sweetness to their already beautifully embellished ending. Isn't there any other way apart from becoming enemies? Eugene calmly asked, his emotions having settled down. He wasn't in the grips of agony or self-delusion. He knew he was staring at Noir Giabella, not the Twilight Witch. No, there are no other ways, Noir replied with a bright smile. I love you and I want to lie in bed together with you. But that said, Hamel, what I feel for you isn't a mix of love and hate. I don't hate you at all. However, the love that I hold for you cannot exist without one of us ending up dead. Noir's desire for his death was motivated by pure love, without any hatred coloring it. Eugene couldn't really understand what Noir was talking about, but he didn't have to think too deeply about it. He just gave up on trying to understand her. Eugene felt himself relax once he had done so. There was no point in feeling any regret. Eugene was relieved as he now knew that there was nothing wrong with his thoughts and the decision that he had come to. Eugene burst into laughter as the tight pressure around his heart disappeared. He thought it was fortunate he had decided to have this conversation with Noir. As Eugene began to laugh without restraint, Noir also let out a graceful chuckle as she covered her mouth with one hand. Noir sighed in pleasure. Even so, I'm quite grateful for our current peace, as it is all thanks to it that a day like this has come. To think that there would actually be a day where I could laugh with you over drinks. This current situation was one of the things that Noir would have never been able to imagine by herself, just like her own death. Hamel, who held such hatred of demon folk, would sit down like this while facing her and share a drink with her. It wasn't simply unimaginable but impossible, at least till now. It feels like a dream, Noir said as she rested her chin on her hand and stared at Eugene. She was the queen of the night demons. She knew better than anyone else that there was no such thing as an eternal dream. She could give the illusion of eternity to those humans who longed for such, but in actuality she was still held back by the restrictions of their reality. There wasn't much time left. After just a few hours, this romantic dream would be over. She felt like she had gained a slight understanding of why the human heart could be so greedy. Indeed, wasn't it because they hated this feeling of disappointment that they wanted their dreams to last forever? While enjoying this feeling of disappointment, Noir whispered to Eugene, "There's still some time left. Would you like to come up to my room?" "Get lost," Eugene grunted. Noir wasn't fazed by his rejection. "Then let's just talk about the old days together." "That's right, how about this? When I first met you in your dreams." Crack. The glass in Eugene's hand shattered into pieces. Asterisk. Noir's stories made the time pass quickly. But the stories from the old days that Noir wanted to talk about were all from the war era that only served to further stoke Eugene's murderous intent, so in the end, they didn't really fit the topic of nostalgia. However, they did end up sharing quite a few other stories. Though more accurately speaking, Noir was the only one doing the talking as Eugene mostly just listened quietly. Noir shared a few stories about the dawn of the new era. The story of how Helmuth became an empire after the war had ended. Of how Noir had risen to the seat of a duke and how she had expanded her influence. She also revealed how many enemies she had devoured in pursuit of her own ambitions and desires. About Raizakia, that idiot was actually my biggest target. After that bastard had eaten his own children and had grown stronger. Right as his arrogance would have reached its peak, that was when I was planning on taking him down, Noir said with a sigh. Because of all the bright street lighting, the actual color of the sky was hard to see. However, both Eugene and Noir could sense that dawn was currently approaching. "He could have eaten you instead," Eugene pointed out. "Eaten me? How absurd. Hamel, you also fought with Raizakia, didn't you? That stupid and arrogant dragon, apart from being a dragon, didn't actually have any other talents," Noir said with a cackle as she walked right next to Eugene. Every time she stepped forward, the lights in the surrounding buildings were switched off. Noir paused thoughtfully. "If I had failed to hunt Raizakia. And if you hadn't been reincarnated, I would have probably become a demon king and challenged the demon king of incarceration. You didn't know that, right? The reason I didn't become a demon king is solely you." Eugene grimaced. "You're saying that as if you could become a demon king whenever you wanted." Noir threw her head back and laughed. That waste, Iris, was also able to become a demon king, so what am I lacking to stop me from becoming a demon king as well? Also, I already know the method to become a demon king. I just don't want to do it. Hypothetically, after she fulfilled her desire to kill Hamel, then at that time, Noir grinned and turned her head towards him to confess. "Hamel, I hate the dawn." She hated how the morning would wake people up from their dreams. "I've always hated it in the past, but I feel like I will hate it even more from now on," Noir said. At some point, all of the city lights that had been centered on Noir and Eugene had been turned off. However, none of the people walking in the distance seemed to question this strange phenomenon. As dawn lit up the streets, Noir felt her chest begin to pound at the sight of Eugene being touched by its faint light. Other emotions welled up within her and combined with those already present. Feeling an inexplicable sense of déjà vu, Noir whispered, "I wish it was twilight right now." If it were twilight, the time when the sun set and night began. Her throat felt like it was burning with longing. Strangely enough, her eyes felt cold and tears began to flow down her cheeks. Ahem, Noir sniffed to think that she would actually end up crying. Noir couldn't help but misunderstand the reason for the tears currently flowing down her cheeks. Could it be that the end of a dream was really this disappointing? Noir chuckled as she held her left hand in her right. She stroked the ring on her ring finger. Noir took a final look at Eugene, who was just standing there with a surprised expression, before turning away with a smile. Well then, goodbye, Hamel.